Welcome to the Advancement Podcast. Our mission is to reach the lost in America by advancing leaders and churches so that communities are transformed. Join us as we discuss how to stay healthy as leaders, work in teams, and lead change. Come on, let's advance together.
Welcome back to another episode of the Advancement Podcast. Hey, if you are enjoying this, do us a big favor and go rate this podcast wherever you get your podcast, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the internet, wherever you get it. We would love that. Just helps us advance the mission of what we're doing here and advance the mission of Jesus. And if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook, go to our Facebook page and like Advancement or subscribe to our YouTube channel. My name is Todd. I'm the host of the Advancement Podcast, joined by the lead consultant of Advancement, Timothy Ware. How you doing today, Tim?
I'm good. Love being here with you.
I have to say your hair looks a lot better today than it has. Now, we're 3 episodes in from your last haircut, but for me, it's the same day. So I'm really glad that April is not your wife.
April is not my wife.
Rachel.
I told her she did such a good job that she was so worried about it. It took a long time, but I mean, she did as good a job as I paid good money for.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad because you were looking real shaggy.
Ooh.
to continue because we got some better cameras and some lighting, and now we're off being in front of a computer screen and things like that, and so looking a lot better today.
Looking better. Yeah, it works out pretty good. I think works out pretty good. She did a great job, and we've been talking about tension the last couple episodes. She was like, "You talk about tension."
Yeah. Well,
tension.
If you watch social media, there has been just as many wives that have messed up the quarantine haircut as fellas that have that have good haircuts. In fact, there's someone on my staff that their wife did a quarantine haircut and he ended up with a buzz cut. So
really?
We won't call him out on but all you got to do is watch the Hope Church and see someone's hair disappear.
She watched probably, I don't know, she watched hours of these. She watched quite a few YouTube videos on how to do it. And then she did it and she was like, "You sure you want me to do this?" She was and I said, "Yep, let's do it."
Yeah.
And so we sat down out there, and the one, I did tell her, "I wish you'd thrown a towel around me or something." Because then she said, "Go take a shower," and I went in and I take my shirt off and it's all over the bathroom.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Stuff. So like,
yeah. Well, but the governor did a good thing here in Texas. He opened up the salons the Friday before Mother's Day, so all of our moms and ladies could be looking sharp for Mother's Day.
Yeah, right.
Even though we couldn't really go anywhere or do much, but
yeah.
But
keep on.
There was always that tension of needing a haircut, but you can't get it anywhere.
That's right.
So we've been talking about tension.
We've been talking
2
about
episodes.
Tension.
So if you have not listened to the last 2 episodes on attention, this is part 3.
Yeah.
So we are building upon each episode. Now you can listen to each episode and probably get something out of it.
That's right.
But we would encourage you to go back and listen to the first 2 episodes, because the first episode, Tim talked through 5 steps of healthy tension. Which is holding things together, bringing alignment. It's the key to movement, increases celebration, and it brings strength.
These 5 things that tension does. That's right.
Yeah. And then last time we talked about how do we build healthy tension in our organization and have accountability as a team and work together. And so this episode, I want to dive a little deeper, because one thing that tension does is sometimes tension brings out the not so good things in people. And, as pastors, sometimes we live in a time where,
I told y'all a story in the last episode. I told a story where tension didn't go well.
Yeah. And so, one thing I wanted to talk about is some reactions that we get to tension. So the first thing I want to ask you is how can we encourage team members that shut down when there's conflict? So let me frame it this way. Sometimes in I've got a very collaborative team, and we have a team that has a lot of opinions. Now, some of my team, when the opinions get strong, which sometimes in a collaborative meeting, when you're pushing things forward and people are passionate about things, it gets strong. There's some tension. The room gets a little bit tighter than before. What do you do with those team members that just shut down and don't add to the conversation and just remain quiet?
Well, I think first of all, let's reinforce the idea that tension. There is no conflict without tension.
Correct.
But tension is not. We don't want to necessarily equate tension to conflict.
Right.
So, because this question kind of bridges the gap, and if we're not careful, for the listener, could taint the benefits of tension.
To phrase my question differently, there is no conflict going on. We're just all passionate about doing something, but at times when we get passionate in our discussion, I have some of my team members that shut down, get quiet, or say maybe things like, well, nobody really wants to hear what I have to say.
Well, okay. I think there's a couple things. Number one, sometimes you're just tired.
Yeah.
And it's not, and you can't muster the energy for the fight.
Yeah.
Now that could be physical fatigue. That could be emotional fatigue. That could be mental fatigue. If it's a one-off, I'm not going to think that much about it. And I need to make sure and coach that person up. Ask the question: do you have any input? If it's a pattern,
yeah,
then I need to dig in, because and it's probably going to lead to a one-on-one meeting.
Yeah.
Where I sit down with this team member and I ask them what's going on, and I begin to look for where this thing is, because if they may just have an aversion to tension. Their pain tolerance may not be very high, and then if that's true, then I have to help as a leader. I have to help grow that tolerance. I have to, which we talked about in the first episode. I have to push it and let it off, push it and let it off, which means in a meeting, when it starts coming up a little bit, I may have to pull it down.
Mm-hmm.
Pull the rest of the room down. But when I pull the rest of the room down a little bit, I have to pull them up.
Yeah.
So I have to manage that tension, soften this, strengthen this. So that's one. But if I discover I could discover a place of emotional, mental, spiritual, knowledge-wise.
Mm-hmm.
Some people may pull out of that conversation if they feel inadequate.
Okay.
And whether it be inadequate in their leadership, inadequate in their, there are some people who they get in. It doesn't matter if they don't know anything.
Yeah.
And they'll look stupid because of it often.
Yeah.
Now you can be a good thinker and you don't have to know a lot about something to have logic and so forth. So I'm not saying that, but there's also that group. But there are some people, they may just recognize, if I don't know anything, if I am not informed about this, then I'm gonna step back. But how do I know that? As a leader, I have to say, okay, you've been awful quiet.
Yeah.
All right, give us your opinion. Tell us what's going on. I have to pull on that, so I have to do a discovery moment.
Right.
Why are you being quiet? I don't want to say it like that.
Yeah.
I want to say, okay, you haven't said much, so give us some input.
Give us some.
And they'll go, I don't know. Okay, why do you feel like you don't have anything to say? You've got something to add.
Yeah.
I need to always make sure that we make room for that, which means when we talk about managing tension, I may have to put a little tension in the room by telling somebody who's just dominating the conversation, okay, you've talked enough. It's time for somebody else.
Yeah.
And we never like it when we're told that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we have to pull that, put that in place and pull those people down. So this piece of, when people don't participate, there's usually an underlying something under there. Either their tolerance isn't there, or they have a long-term fatigue, a short-term fatigue. Those are the things I would look for.
Yeah. So that brings me to my next question, which, when we're building tension in a room, sometimes things get tense,
Absolutely.
for lack of a better word.
Heated even.
Heated, yeah.
Yeah.
And so what do we do when we build tension in a room? And instead of people just handling it for what it is, trying to move forward or bring a resolution to an issue that we're facing, what do we do when someone loses their cool? Because we've all been in that meeting where we're building, and somebody loses their cool, and then either one, we have to grab control of the room, or things get out of hand.
First of all, to what you just said, I hope that's going to be a moment where you're going to find out how healthy your team is.
Right.
If the leader grabbing control of the room and calling someone out on poor behavior, should be the last thing. If the team is healthy, the team members should say, okay, that was out of line.
Okay.
If you've got the healthier your team, the less the leader has to step in when things go off the rails, because the rest of the team will hold itself accountable.
Yeah.
So they'll drive that piece for you, and that's what you want. That's what you're hoping for. That's what you're trying to build towards. A great, this makes me think of a great book by Patrick Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and he talks about the fear of conflict is one of those 5 dysfunctions. And in this moment where people lose their, when the tension gets too high and they go off the rails, they lose their cool. What usually happens is that they took something, it's moved to personal.
Yeah.
So they took it personally. The issue, if we should be able to be passionate and strong and all those things around the issue, and it's never personal.
Yeah.
But that's a discipline, okay? Because if I attack your position on an issue, it may feel personal.
Yeah.
But how I phrase it and my attitude will determine whether it's personal. If I say, okay, that was stupid. Okay, that I've just called you stupid.
Yeah.
Now, if I can say, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Same idea.
Well, you have the option there to either clarify,
right,
or rebut the conversation. I mean, I think part of it comes with our language. We have to manage the language in the room.
Yeah.
And call and say, hey, I know you're not calling them stupid, but what are you trying to say here?
Yeah. So I think, people are going, and it's going to happen periodically.
Oh yeah.
So we have to build that mutual accountability into our team. And here again, if it becomes a continual pattern with somebody, as a leader, we have to watch for those patterns.
Right.
And if it becomes a continual pattern, then I'm going to ask 2 questions. I'm going to ask, are they just the wrong person for the team? Which is going to create crazy tension.
Sure.
Because
yeah.
In churches, we've got this love thing that we built. But you know what? If they don't need to be on the team, if they're hurting the larger organization, then I have to remove them from the team.
Yeah.
Which creates all that internal tension, and then is going to create tension on your team because you removed them. So there's all these questions. So, but I think you have to ask that question. And the other one is, if you're not convinced if you're convinced that they should be on your team, then you have to ask the next question, which is, how do I lead them and develop them out of this? This is you're deciding you've decided it's a developmental issue.
Yeah.
And if it's a developmental issue, does that mean that you're meeting with them, that you need to make sure they go see a counselor? They need an outside coach? Is this or I need them to listen to a podcast or read a book, or there's a deficiency that I have to develop them through.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't know, sometimes people just refuse to be developed. We talked about in the first episode on this, how people refuse to go to the doctor, and there's that tension. They may refuse. And I hate to say it, but sometimes the best thing we can do for a person is remove them from our team to push them to a place where they're going to grow.
Right.
Because they get shocked. Not everybody is, but.
So what would you say to maybe the leader, or, some of us have these people on our team that just feel like everyone should get along, from the standpoint of there should be no tension because everybody should just be, almost a utopian sense of we should all just be happy. We should not have to have tension because, we've established in the other episodes that in order for us to have growth, there has to be tension.
All right. First of all, I would say that's not only unrealistic, but it's also naive.
Okay.
This is ministry, and the entirety of what Jesus has asked us to do is to maintain tension between heaven and hell.
Yeah.
That if you don't go to hell, if you don't choose Jesus, you will go to hell.
Right.
And miss heaven.
Yeah.
That's the basic. Now, I don't have to say it quite so strong,
right,
but that is it. And if we think that we can do our job without tension, then that's naivety and again, underdevelopment. And we need to teach. We need to develop. We need to work. I mean, people would love to say that. I mean, it'd be nice. Here's the reality. Teams and churches move forward. The body of Christ will move forward through unity, not through consensus.
Yeah. Let's take a moment and hear a word about advancement.
Do you feel like your church is stuck in a rut? Then we've got the answer for you here at Advancement. Do you need some personal coaching or maybe some leadership coaching? We can help you out. Contact the Advancement team at info@advancement.cc or check out the website at advancement.cc.
Now let's get back to the podcast.
I don't agree with all the theology of the various movements that are out there, but that doesn't mean I'm not in support of their proclamation of the gospel.
Yeah.
The moment that I'm running them down and disunity has dropped in, I was on sometime back on Facebook, I saw a guy I haven't seen in, 25 years. He was we're still Facebook friends, of course, right?
Yeah.
And he posted some article about another a person, speaker, a communicator, and he bashed their theology, something that they said. He said, they said this, and that doesn't, and this. And I went on and I said, first of all, there are these passages in the scripture that seem to conflict with what you said. And I said, second of all, this person is effectively seeing people come to Christ. Just because they're not in full agreement with your theological position, you're not doing the body of Christ any good by bashing them in a public space.
Right.
And the rebuttal.
Yeah, came. I'm sure.
But we don't need consensus around anything other than Jesus is the way, the truth, and life, and no man gets the Father except by Him.
Right.
There are a few places that we have to have consensus.
Right.
But you don't need consensus to have unity.
Right.
And I think that's part of what you have to recognize there. And we need to teach our teams, we need to teach our churches that, because church splits happen. People get mad and go because they want their way, and then they want everybody they want their way, and they want consensus around that way. give people a voice, but that doesn't mean we're going to go that way.
Right. So we're coming towards the end of this episode. I kind of want to put a bow on all three. Okay. So I want you to give us an example where you use tension to reach a desired outcome, and why is it that it was successful the way that you did it, and what can we learn from it?
So I was leading a church, and my predecessor had a reputation for being, let's say, not just strong, but oftentimes angry.
Okay.
And handling things through that, and there were a lot of personal things going on that. In that, there's no judgment. This is just the way that it was communicated to me through other leaders, and we were facing some challenges. And I was in the boardroom. Had this for a church this size, it was a couple hundred of it, and had a extra large board, and we were in a board meeting. And the person had been the chair in the interim confronted me on something, that I was abusing authority.
Okay.
This was, it was a direct accusation.
It's a big statement.
Big, yeah. And I walked around the room and I said, okay, so these are the responsibilities that were put in place before I got here, and we haven't made those changes. With how some churches give responsibilities to different board members, and they all go, yeah. And I went, and so I'm managing the tension, because the tension's high, but it's an unhealthy tension.
Right.
And so I'm shifting the tension I'm going to shift the tension. And what I do is I go around and I say, okay, did this decision, this one you listed in your questions, and my abuse of authority, did we have this conversation? Oh yeah. And I went around the room like that, and I said, the issue here is not an abuse of authority. The issue is that you think you should have you want to have a voice and control in everything, and that's not the way the system's set up.
Right.
So there hasn't been an abuse. It's the tension. The problem here is you think everything should come back to this table, when that's not true. And this is your problem, not my problem, not anybody else's problem. So there was a personal shot there, but this was a developmental moment. They had never dealt with conflict in a healthy way either.
Right.
And then he broke loose. Now you have to realize, when you're in conflict, high tension, low tension, whatever, you have to stay on the issue, not make it personal.
Right.
And you have to maintain an even keel, which is very hard for me because I'm quite passionate.
Yeah.
And there was a moment where there were accusations started flying, and another individual, an ethnic individual in the room, threw their church keys across the room. Serious. I'm not making this up. And was walking out. And I had a choice in that moment. The tension, it wasn't just tension was high, but it was unhealthy. And I had a moment. What do I do? I actually got up and stepped in front of this person before they left. And I said, you know that I love you. Yes. So here's what I said to this person. I said, I need you to sit down, and we're going to walk through this. This has been bubbling for a long time, and we have to deal with it. And we have to deal with it now. It can't wait any longer.
Right.
Now, that was the point of tension I put in the room. The main tension was there's been unhealthy dialogue, conflict, unhealthiness in this group, and it's time to deal with it. Now, we spent 5 hours in our board meeting.
Wow.
It was incredibly long.
Wow.
It was. I left the church that night at 1 a.m.
Mm.
And yet, of course, I stayed a little after everybody else too. But the point is, I had to take the unhealthiness and turn it and put the tension in the room that this is unhealthy.
Right.
All of this is unhealthy. the issues need to be resolved, but the way it's being done, the tension was around this is unhealthy and we have to resolve it. And over that night, I taught them, I led them through some different things. And by the end, I have 5 of this group of 7 on their way out the door saying, after 5 hours, saying, thank you.
Yeah.
So, the way we manage, it's not just about managing conflict, but the way we manage tension. Because I said it in a previous episode, where we apply the tension, I could have put the tension around the issues that were being brought up, that were being conflicted over. But the real place that we needed healthy tension and needed resolution, and where we needed friction so we could get movement, where these guys needed to feel the pressure that could be let off so that they could begin to grow, all of those things, what we had to align around was that was unhealthy. So I had to put, didn't matter what else was going on. I had, as the leader, had to identify the tension, the place where we needed the tension, and put it down. Now I may have applied a little more there than I needed to, but I didn't, because it felt like it was spiraling out of control a little bit. So I landed kind of solidly there for a little bit. But if we don't work in tension, that is how you have to lead through, and you have to identify, okay, that's unhealthy, that's too high, that's too low. This is where, but I think I said it in the, I said it in one of the episodes before this one, that it's in the combination that we get the most movement. And so you can't be afraid of it. You have to realize that healthy tension will bring alignment, that it will be the glue. That group was better after that moment than they had ever been. And we saw some great things. I'm just so thrilled with what God's still doing there.
Yeah.
So finding those places where you put the right tension, you cannot be afraid of it. But done well, I want you to know the celebration that it didn't feel like cheerleader jump up and down, but across that for weeks, that was celebration.
Yeah.
Because sometimes celebration is the cheerleader jumping, but you know what? Sometimes I celebrate a job well done by sitting on the porch with a glass of tea, looking at the yard that we just mowed and going, man, that looks good.
Yeah. Sometimes just taking the burden off your shoulders.
Yeah. Is a celebration.
Or getting rid of that
thing
that's always been there that you can't ever seem to get over.
Yeah. So, there you go. There's an example.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of towards the end of our time.
All right.
Do you want to ask me the question you always ask me?
What's your takeaway?
I would say the biggest takeaway from all 3 episodes, because this is the last one on tension, is that tension is vital to move your organization forward. It's not always easy. Sometimes it can get messy. But if managed the right way, you will get the desired movement in your organization that you won't be able to get any other way. And it's just amazing how God has designed it. I mean, he's designed tension in our physical body to help us grow, to help us get stronger. It's just part of his design that everything moves together. And so we've got to let the tension get high enough, but not too high to harm us. But we can't get it too low, because not enough tension harms us as well.
Yeah. I think a good, simple illustration for pastors is an altar call.
Okay.
If I'm trying to move people towards faith at the end of my sermon, and our evangelical guys the listeners will really get this piece, that if, back when I was growing up, they used to preach hell hot, man.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's hard. And, you end up, we would talk about back in those days about people responding to the gospel out of fear.
Okay.
And not being healthy, that it wouldn't last.
Fire insurance.
Right. So I'm getting fire insurance. So I've put too much tension. But the other side of that is, today we had the seeker sensitive movement that says you don't ever put tension in the room.
Yeah.
That says, if you're on the journey to faith, we would see guys preach these great messages, and then they let the air out of the room.
Yeah, let off the tension.
They let off the tension, and nobody responds. Nobody picks the card up out of the chair. Nobody does anything because we didn't put any tension. And that if we take that idea of learning and practicing managing tension in our responses, and then take those rules and what we feel, learn to, you can put that basic idea is how you can be applied in various places.
Yeah. Well,
all right.
Coming to the end of another one, Tim.
Yes, and here we are. This would be probably the last of the new studio editions, because after this, it won't be it'll be still new, but not.
So big thanks again to the Crossing Place.
Absolutely. Thank you to the Crossing
Granbury.
Place, Pastor Tim Petty, and the Crossing Place for partnering with us to
letting us bug him on Mondays.
Yeah. That's right. So,
hey, thanks for joining us on the Advancement Podcast. Go share it with all your friends. Help us to advance this mission, and we'll see you next time.
And if you need somebody to come alongside you, go to info@advancement.cc, and we'll follow up with you.
We'll get you hooked up, and then we'll see you next time on the Advancement Podcast.
If you would like to keep this content coming, all Tim and Todd ask is $1 per show. See how to give, maybe even sponsor an episode or series on the website advancement.cc. Until next week, continue to advance the mission of Jesus.